Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Tooele Happy Hour, where if a podcast had head trauma, it might sound like this.
If head trauma had a podcast.
I'll get it right someday.
You get it right every other time, so don't be hard on yourself.
Right, I know. Hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, says Meatloaf.
Hey, 1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Well, yeah, especially for us. So introducing our new host. Not so new, but Jared.
All right, I'm Jared.
I'm David, and today's guest we have Linjie. Now, Linjie is a very special person. He's near and dear to my heart. I've known him for a few years. He's got a great background story. He's very well spoken. He knows all about China. Imagine that. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the Belt and Road Initiative. He's going to tell us about China martial law, all these things like that kind of we don't know from a Chinese perspective what they are. And, there might even be some other details he can fill us in here about current events as well. Linjie, will you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yes, my name is Linjie. I was born in 1982 in Shanghai, China, and I moved actually to Sweden in my 20s to start my university. So I got my bachelor in economics from the Stockholm University in Sweden, and then I got my master in international relations from Schiller University in Paris. They have campuses around the world, in Paris, in Heidelberg, in Berlin. And then I also have another master in international affairs from the King's College London. So right now I'm serving as a research fellow at the Center for Foreign Affairs and Defense Policy in Texas. So that's my general background. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I have a lot of questions. There's so much going on. Well, China's a big place, and it's full of billions of people. So there's always going to be a lot going on there. Just because of the sheer numbers, I mean, the place could be vanilla and it'd still have more flavors than anywhere else. So I've got a plethora of questions. Now, last month, Jiang Zemin, did I say that correctly?
Yes, Jiang Zemin, yes.
He passed away last month. Yeah. Now, from my understanding, he was the head honcho that Xi Jinping kind of ousted, and he was always a constant threat over Xi Jinping's shoulder the whole time.
That's correct.
And he was also a strong man. He started, he kind of ran the secret police there for a long time. Yes. He kind of started up everything. And was he the guy that was in charge during the Tiananmen Square riots?
Yeah, basically he rise up as the Chinese head of state during the compromise of, after the 1989, because you have the Youth League group together with the old oligarch. So they have a sort of like a disagreement. So Jiang Zemin becomes sort of a person rise up into the position because he has a relatively very clean background, you see. Of course, I mean, he was supporting the massacre during the Tiananmen, incident because he had no choice. He was, under the control of then Deng Xiaoping, because Deng Xiaoping was his main promoter, to give him the position as the chairman of China. But then again, he has some very interesting legacy because, during the past 30 years, Jiang Zemin was actually the leader, implemented the open door policy of Deng Xiaoping. So therefore, I mean, people from my generation, we really appreciate him. We like him. He's very charismatic. Of course, he is still a leader of the Chinese CCP, but that doesn't prevent him being a charismatic leader. So he's very outspoken, and he speaks different languages. He speaks 4 different languages. I mean, no other Chinese leaders has his level of competence and also academic training. And, so people are very impressed, by him, people from my generation in particular. Yes.
Okay. Now, with where he was always kind of I don't know, a threat to Jinping. Now that he's gone, what moves do you think we might see out of Jinping now?
Yeah, because they call it Shanghai Gang. Jiang Zemin is the head of the Shanghai Gang. All these guys are coming from Shanghai originally. So Xi Jinping has a very different background. He's from the countryside. Xi Jinping during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, he was trained from a small village outside the Xi'an. So we have to understand the entire background is very different. Jiang Zemin is sort of like from the bourgeois background, from Shanghai. He's well educated. He reads English. He can communicate with what's his name, the American journalist Wallace. There was an interview with Jiang Zemin. It was very charismatic. So Wallace asked him, "Are you a dictator?" He was smiling. He was, "It depends how you define a dictator, right?" So he's a very interesting person. He has a sort of energy. This kind of energy is unusual among the communist leaders in China. But Xi Jinping is very different. Xi Jinping is coming from Cultural Revolution. He's not well read. He doesn't speak any other language besides Chinese. Even his Chinese has a very, he has a very limited knowledge because sometimes he cannot even pronounce the words right. They even have to show him pinyin from the screen. So people are mocking him. So, these two leaders, Jiang Zemin versus Xi Jinping, they are from a very different background. That's why Xi Jinping has a sort of envy towards, Jiang Zemin. It's sort of jealousy in a way because he's well educated and himself he's not. So you see, we have a sort of let's say hidden psychological warfare behind as well.
And wasn't I'm trying to remember back. Wasn't Zemin escorted from, I don't know what you call it, the big council about 3 months ago? He was kind of escorted out. And then
it's not him, it's Hu Jintao. Hu Jintao is basically, after Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao became the president of China. Hu Jintao is the leader of the Chinese Youth League. The Youth League is like also a group. They are the opposition from the Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is supposed to represent the Princeling party. The Princelings are those people with the revolution blood, okay? Their parents are fighting together with Mao Zedong. That's
how many parties are there? How many parties are there in the Chinese Communist Party? How many?
It's a different cliches within. Yes, there are mainly three. So you have the number one is led by Jiang Zemin. Jiang Zemin, they are basically from the Shanghai. It's called the traditional Shanghai Gang, okay? And then you have the Youth League. Youth League is like the second generation, that's third generation actually, leaders of China. That's basically also the current Chinese Prime Minister, Li Keqiang. Li Keqiang is also belongs to the Youth League group together with Hu Jintao. Then you have Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is supposed to represent the Princeling, the red bloodline, but he also betrays them. That's why, during his fighting for position, they throw, what's his name, Bo Xilai into jail, because Bo Xilai was his main competitors in 2013, because Bo Xilai was also a very charismatic person. So Xi Jinping is sort of like, he hates anybody that has more charisma than himself, because, he is not a leader. He just doesn't have those kind of the soft power as a leader. You see what I'm saying? Yes.
He's rather
Xi Jinping is very good at manipulating the power dynamics, but he's not knowledgeable. He's not educated. He doesn't know anything about the foreign affairs nor military affairs. The only thing he knows about is the power struggle. Now, the power struggle has a long tradition in the Chinese statecraft. That's from the Qing dynasty, from the Confucius, and so it has a much stronger, let's say, domestic roots in China. But it's not global. It's not cosmopolitan, you see. So that makes a big difference.
Hey, Linjie, what do you think happened to that individual who was escorted out of that council meeting? Do you think they might have strapped him to one of those Tiandi tiger chairs and pulled his organs online?
what happened to him is they had Xi Jinping threatened him, basically threatened the life of his grandchildren. So therefore, because the people were actually, according to many, let's say, non-mainstream commentators, the Youth League Party are working together with Wall Street. Now, basically, the Jewish power within the United States. That's why Xi Jinping doesn't like it. Xi Jinping is a very strong leader, just like Putin. They don't like anybody that has to do business with Soros. So that's what's happening, actually. Of course, I mean, the mainstream media won't tell you anything about this. But according to my own research, that's actually the case. Now, you have the people who's like a pro-market economy in China, the open door policy people, that's the Youth League people. And they work secretly with the Wall Street, the Democrats, basically, in the United States.
That's not shocking. Do you think that? Well, one of my big questions is with Xiamen removed,
that's Hu Jintao, that the person who was removed from the Chinese parliamentary meeting was Hu Jintao.
But I had come to an understanding that Xiamen was Xiamen carried a threat that always hovered over Xi Jinping's shoulder, because he was more liked, and he was especially more liked by the military and the law enforcement in China. They're his kind of his group, I guess.
But he's old, he's 96 years old. He passed away. But his legacy was very strong because he consolidated the Shanghai gang. This group who has faith towards him, they're from Shanghai normally. And then their roots is based in Shanghai. And these people involved with the Chinese, the head of the police, the Chinese Anti-Corruption Commission during old time, Zheng Fawei. And we also have the Chinese, the Communist Disciplinary Committee. And all these people are under Jiang Zemin's control. That's very true. So Jiang Zemin's influence was everywhere in the society in China. So that became a major challenge for Xi Jinping's power. That's why he tried to clean up of these people. So he said all these people are corrupt. So that's why Xi Jinping started the anti-corruption campaign,
So he tried starting his own secret police to fight the old secret police, kind of.
Exactly.
Oh,
so with his passing...
He changed the constitution. Then what really happens is, in order to surpass the Chinese constitution, he learned from Vladimir Putin to create a special committee, the Foreign Policy Special Committee, the Special Committee for National Security. All these so-called subcommittees is to create it in order to surpass the Chinese national constitution. And he got that from Putin, actually.
So with his passing, now he inherits the former individual's status with the secret police and absorbs them, or is there still going to be some sort of a friction?
Yeah. What moves do you think are open now to him that weren't open when this threat hovered? Do you think he has more strength now, more ability to move?
Yes, within the party, yes. But then again, the fundamental question is, as we know, a few weeks ago, we had the white paper revolution in China. The students holding this white paper all across China. And so basically, he doesn't win the heart of people. People doesn't like him. Most people in China sees him as a clown. People see him as an uneducated, sort of provincial person, So people don't believe he has the ability to lead China, because the modern China is not a China from like 30, 40 years ago. China is the second most important country in the world besides United States. So most people don't trust that Xi Jinping has the competence to run China. I mean, not just from the grassroots level, but from elite level as well, from the intellectuals, from the Chinese, the thinkers, the academics. Nobody believes Xi Jinping has natural ability to lead China.
Well, not just that, but as China continues to open up, because they're not all the way open yet. Obviously, but as they continue to open up, they're going to become the most important by sheer volume. Let's look at it like the NBA, the basketball players. If you're looking at, if China was to open up, and what is China, 6 billion people or something?
1.4 billion people.
1.4. So I overestimated. That's still,
The world is about 7 billion. I believe.
yeah. China's 1.4 billion. The United States is what, 330 million?
Yeah, one third of that, I think.
One
More or
third.
less. You have 400 million more.
China would obviously be more important commercially to any market once it gets there. And if it keeps moving forward, it's going to get there.
You know, the question is, Xi Jinping, just like Putin, they don't, of course, they want China to become a strong country, but they rather compromise the economic power to withhold this power in their own hand, because they don't want, because, you know, if you become a democracy, if you become a market economy, the majority share of your country won't belong to your own people. It belongs to the people on the Wall Street. I mean, any country in the world.
Well,
We're talking about Estonia, Latvia, and European countries, Sweden. All the majority of democracies, actually, the power is not within the people of that country, but in Wall Street. So
well, yeah, and honestly, if China completely liberalizes, I think Wall Street will no longer be on Wall Street. It will be in Shanghai.
You know, a few days ago, I was reading a book, very interesting. He is a runaway billionaire from China. He talks about this. He says, you know, if China become sort of like, that's why Wall Street doesn't want China to become a democracy, because if China truly become a democracy, then all their dirty laundries will be showed. You know, because all these people, like what's his name, Hunter Biden, right? He has a lot of interest in China. He even he had hooked up with the prostitutes in China. Now the Chinese Communist Party has all records of this.
Mm-hmm.
All these so-called the democratic leaders.
It's the
they all
Operation
have some stake in China.
Operation Midnight Climax China edition. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm sure. I imagine that there is not well, let's say a Chinese diplomat's kid comes over here. I'm sure that we have assets assigned to find out what they're doing and is there any criminal activity going on, just like, and China is kind of a secret passion of mine. That's why I look into all this and all that, because it's an interesting place. It's the oldest culture on earth. It's the longest standing single culture, even if you break it down by the different empires it had, you know. But even if you add them all together, which they are kind of continuous when you look at it, it goes back further than writing. And it's an interesting culture. And if you look into the history, you can see why China has been able to be communist and survive, because communism works well under kind of a Confucius legalism. Communism works well.
Very true. Very true. I totally agree with you, because, you know, the sort of communism is also based on the authoritarian sort of philosophy. Mm-hmm. And when you look at Confucius, you look at legalism, as you mentioned. Yep. And
oh, dang it.
You know, that's why China do get along with Russia. China do get along with Cuba. China do get along with Belarus, for example, you know. So all these traditions, even though it's from different cultural aspect, but the essence are the same.
Yeah,
very true.
That legalism is, I don't know a lot about it, but it comports well to a top-down society where you feel safe as a person, as a member of a bigger society with a strong man on charge, where over here we're individualist society.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like a professor from University of Chicago, very famous American scholar, Mearsheimer, he talks about this. He says, the Western liberalism always look at individual as the unit. But well, again, we are on this planet, we are interconnected. So that's why countries like China do understand, nations are a collective whole. That's why we have nationalism. Nationalism is something bound us together, in fact.
Yeah. And China's extremely strong for it. I think the real interesting confluence of that is really when you look at Korea, because Korea has figured out how to meld the two, I think, most optimally. Korea's a kind of a juggernaut, punching way beyond its size on the international scale. But I think China, if China figures out, well, China's also got to deal with the one child policy, which is, I don't know.
We have a crisis right now because in China now they talk about you can have 3 kids, but nobody wants because it costs a lot of money to have 3 kids. You don't want them to be douchebags in the future, so you want to send them to good schools and all these early childhood education programs. It costs a lot of money. So the Chinese young people, there's no motivation to have more than just one.
Well, it's not just that, but the 20 to 30-year-old people today are looking at in 10 years, the first group from that one child policy are going to retire. So the government or the state is going to require so much more from them to support this mass retirement that they don't want to have another expenditure with kids on the other side too. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think we might see I think worldwide we're going to see issues, but I think we're going to see China go crazy because of this.
Well, look at Japan.
We have demographic crisis at the moment. So Chinese government are so eager to encourage young people to have more children, but nobody has interest to have children anymore. You even get rewarded if you get children.
Yeah.
That's why, for example, all these after school programs are canceled by the Chinese government because, they want to sort of, help people to overcome their financial disadvantages.
What about, didn't China 3 months ago legalize all what they called, this is a horrible name, but this is China. They're looking at all their black children, all the second children from during the one child policy, the second and sometimes third that had no legal status. They legalized them all and gave them all status.
Yeah. But it's only in the countryside you have a problem with this. But I think in the urban areas, I never heard this. I have to be very fair. That I also heard a few months ago, some people doing research on this called black child phenomena, but I don't think it's a major thing.
Really?
At least in urban areas, it's not a big thing. Yes, people do sometimes have illegal children, but you just pay extra penalties. Those penalties are not major. Most people can afford it, So I believe this is also a part of the Western sort of information warfare against China to make China look bad. There's always, nobody is innocent. We're talking about major political struggles among the major powers. So nobody's innocent.
Well, let's look at when the one child policy came in, it came in 79, right after Kissinger went over there. I'm pretty sure the one child policy was egged on by our government over here at the same time. So I don't completely blame China. I think it was a short-sighted maneuver.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're not replacing yourself, especially in a socialist system, you've got to replace yourself because you require other people to maintain life.
Yeah.
So it was short-sighted. There were plenty of mistakes made along the way to communism by the Chinese government, but anyways, we've beat on that bush plenty. I don't dislike China. I think China is an impressive country. It is definitely a mover and shaker on the world scene. and it's going to continue to make things happen.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
in that format of moving and shaking, it's currently building the Belt and Road Initiative, which I don't see how that won't lead China to a more democratic, more free market type system if it actually succeeds in this project. But could you tell us a little bit about what this project is and where they're trying to go with it?
Yeah, so basically there's two ways to understand the Belt and Road. The Belt and the Road. The Belt is basically the maritime strategy of China. China trying to open different ports, different seaways with different countries. And then the road is basically the land strategy, the sort of traditional strategy. Because China as a power, it's a land power, traditionally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So the sort of maritime culture was never part of China. It was the British. The British had colonies in more than 50 countries.
Well,
So
didn't
Britain was
China,
a traditional type of a maritime power? So China is a land power.
wasn't
So
it
now
in,
China's strategy is trying to combine both the land power and maritime power. That became the Road and Belt strategy.
I looked into it a little bit. In like 1100, China had an emperor that built this great big navy, and more than likely even sailed to what is now the United States. This is long before Columbus made a journey, but then
In 1428, China had Zheng He, that during the Ming Dynasty. But Zheng He's strategy was not military. It was only to showcase China's cultural achievement. It's sort of like a bragging. In all these small islands, Malaysia, the modern Indonesia, they travel even all the way to the east coast of Africa to showcase the civilizational achievement of the Chinese nation. So China never had like the British. They had a trade initiative. They had a trade ambition. They had a commercial ambition. But China never had that. That's why the Chinese maritime strategy was never succeeded, because then what happens again, the Confucianism, the Confucius of the court start to forbid such kind of strategy during the Ming Dynasty.
The bureaucrats freaked out, and didn't they burn his whole navy in in a week? They lit it all on, and he had, according to the time I've read about this, he had this amazing, impressive navy, and the head ship, which was, it was the admiral was a Muslim.
He was a eunuch, actually.
Eunuch or something. Interesting story there, but the ship was huge. It was something like,
they're called junks. They're these.
Well, this
huge...
one was not a junk. This one was massive. I read about it, and it was even by today's standards, it was impressively huge.
They bring like more than 300 people on the boat. They had doctors. They have the Chinese scientists. They have the Confucius. They have scholars. They bring everybody. There's like porcelain. They also have the Chinese silk, tea, everything that you can imagine. Then they bring back to China even the African animals, the giraffe. So that's where the Chinese dragon comes from. The other form of dragon called the key ring. During the time, people don't even understand what they saw. This gigantic animal, in the Chinese imperial court. They were like, "What the hell is that?" That's a giraffe. But the Chinese doesn't know. They think it's like a form of dragon, a deer and a dragon. So they name it called key ring. And key ring become a traditional Chinese beast nowadays. In many Chinese architecture, you can find the image of key ring. Key ring is originally, it came from the African giraffe, actually. Very interesting story.
That is wild. It's impressive. It's and the bureaucrats, the Confucian bureaucrats, burned the navy down, and they did it. They lit it on fire, and like a matter of a week, they burned this armada to the
exactly.
Well, the next incoming leader after that dynasty was a bit of a recluse, and he didn't want anything to do with the outside world.
It wasn't just him. It was the China under Confucianism. The emperor didn't carry as much power as you'd think. The bureaucrats, the Confucius bureaucrats, carried an ridiculous power, and that's even something that the Manchurians,
moral supremacy. They're the moral supremacy. They are sort of like it's sort of like a psychological blackmail, if we can put it that way.
Yeah, and and sometimes they did real good. But even when you read the writings of the different empires that came, where you've got when the Manchurians came, they fell into where the Confucius bureaucrats started running them too. And
True. They convert them.
When the Mongols took over northern China, the bureaucrats took over them. They took over everyone that conquered any bit of China was then conquered by the bureaucrats within a decade, because the bureaucrats were smart. They were educated. They knew their stuff. They were also
brainwash. The English language, we have the word, the brainwashing. Brainwashing is originally coming from China, from the Confucius scholar. They know how to brainwash people. They know how to subvert other cultures into Chinese. That's why even in China, we make fun of ourselves. Like, no, nobody can conquer us. They conquer us, we conquer them. It's very easy. The Chinese culture is so deep. It's so.
It is.
It's like a psychological blackmail, I tell you, because I'm Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how all these, different moral principles trying to choke you down. It's very dangerous in a way.
Well, the Chinese know how to eat the elephant better than anyone else. They just do it one bite at a time. But you can see it through all the history you read. China never lost its culture. Not once. No matter
but it's not a good culture. Let me tell you, the Confucian culture is not a good culture. It's based on hierarchy. It's not based on sort of a natural compassion. It's based on a sort of forced compassion. Even in the Chinese culture, if you read the book, I remember it's a Harvard scholar. His last name is Landis, David Landis. He talks about a Chinese culture is based on the agricultural labor division. So therefore, this hierarchy is very strict. Nobody can survive. It's sort of like India. India, you have the caste, but the caste is more like a spiritual sort of foundation. And in China, it's just like it's a functional division.
Yeah, that is, it's, and they used to have tests to make it into the Confucius school, the bureaucracies. Does China still have a test like that today to get into government?
It's a national examination for entering college. It's sort of like SAT, but it's required. I mean, SAT, like today, the U.S. schools, man, they don't even take SAT anymore, right? It's based on a sort of interview or sort of other type of merits. But in China, the national university entrance exam is still highly respected. I mean, that's the only way for average person to change his destiny in a way too. If you are not born in the right family, I mean, you have no future. So that's your only way to get out. Sort of the only way to be able to have a social mobility in this kind of way. Going to college, going to a good college.
Do you think that's poised to change in China anytime soon, or is that?
I think, the Chinese national examination sort of method is very good in a way, because, I mean, it gives everybody a chance. Because if you look, just compare with India, if you born with a low caste, you are over. I mean, you are over.
Oh, yeah. I read somewhere that in India, there is more genetic difference between the castes in India than there is between people in Norway and people in Spain.
Yeah.
Which is insane. People in Norway and people in Spain are genetically closer than people who live in the same town.
Well, they won't breed with each other if they're in a different caste.
Yeah, the caste is a very dangerous thing. But in China, even though we have the Confucius, division, we talk about social hierarchy, but you can still change it because you have this national examination system. So anybody can change it. If you work hard enough, you can rise to the top. And that's the beauty of in China. So China is not such a bad society. Of course, we have no freedom of speech with no democracy. But in another way, social mobility is open for anybody.
Yeah. And I mean, let's face it, very few places have freedom of speech. Totally. I mean, the U.S. might be it. The U.S. and your own bathroom while you're sitting on the throne. That's it. But okay, well, I do want to talk more about Belt and the Road, but I kind of want to ask you about your personal story, because I've known a few Chinese people in my life from China, not just, and most of them are quite positive about these things in China. And you seem like you're not a American liberal, but more Lockean liberal in your thinking. How did that come about?
I think, as a human being, we can sort of decide our own destiny, because, this is a very profound discussion, of course. If you really believe in the spirituality, I mean, of course, we create it differently, but we all have a potential to change within this lifetime as well. And so therefore, I believe the government should free people, should really let people be the way they are, And the problem with the Confucianism culture is suppress people's natural ability. And it's not good, because it always tells you what is the moral principle, what is the way,
Mm-hmm.
I have my own freedom, my own choice to decide my own destiny. And I believe that's very important to understand it. That's why we are, even though, of course, we're living within the society, we are interconnected with others, but in the same time, we have this individual body. And this body is functioning on itself, right? So therefore, I mean, how do you decide what is collective, what is independent? I mean, everything is relative in this way.
What brought you to this way of thinking? How old were you when you gained this revelation?
I think I traveled I traveled more than 40 countries. I spent, my early years in different countries. I traveled, in the United States, Australia. I've been to Austria, Sweden. I believe I'm quite global. When you look at different traditions, you look at different nationalities, you look at different people, you can sort of making this comparative analysis. And it's a very obvious. People from individualistic cultures are happier.
Yeah.
Are happier. And you can make... also, your life is more simple. The interpersonal relationship is also more easygoing than in a sort of collective society.
Well, yeah, you
have to consider the feelings of everybody. That's tough, to be honest with you.
That, and you don't have a threat of stepping on toes of the non-present third-party government.
Exactly.
Do you think that Chinese people don't think of other people's feelings as frequently as other cultures?
They have to. They think about other people's feelings more, I believe, but in a superficial way, because therefore it's not like a natural driven. It's not because you are compassionate. Let's say if I'm compassionate, then I think about your feelings because I see you as equal human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Chinese way, it's because I don't want to offend other people, because I may lose my job, I may lose my girlfriend, I may lose my family support. So you have this sort of social conditioning that is very strong within the sort of collective culture. I mean, not just in China. You look at India, it's perhaps the same. In any kind of, I'm sorry to use the word, I like to call those cultures, I'm sorry to say, backward cultures, because it's based on a sort of not based on self-autonomy. That's very sad, in fact, because as a human being, I believe I have the full potential to realize my own way of realization, right? My own enlightenment. I don't need other parties to tell me what to do. But that's not the case. But in many cultures, not just China, you go to Belarus, Russian, they are the same. They are collective. You have one person decide for everybody, like Vladimir Putin. For such a big country, that's very dangerous. That's why we have the situation today. You have another collective culture like Ukraine, but they are so eager to be a part of West, but not naturally, in a sort of, superficial way. That's also very dangerous. Then we have this world,
Yeah.
Well, I look at our culture and I'm like, I'm seeing like all this trans movement going on, and our normal minded individuals, I like to refer to them as, speak out against it. And then it seems like a collective pushes back within our own society. And even though it's not normal, you're still feeling like you're wrong. And I feel kind of like that's the direction our culture is going in. And
I think something very important to, keep myself reminded is that I think the golden time of the West is also gone, because in the 90s, in the 80s, I mean, you don't have this sort of multiculturalism. I mean, multiculturalism have to be selective. Depends what kind of multiculturalism come into a Western society.
What part of the
what's
culture?
going on today with America? You have the other day I shared with David this the map of IQ in different states. You can look at yourself. The state with less multiculturalism has the highest IQ. You look at the state like North Dakota, for example, Utah, where you are at, high IQ. Then
I'm not on that list. They didn't count me.
Lower IQ.
They didn't count your IQ, Jared.
No, they didn't. They didn't. That's because I didn't even make it onto the chart. They start at 1, and but anyways, well, the issue that I think comes from that is this is one of the issues you find in most societies where they have a top-down structure, or communism is well known for this, is that you have to pause disbelief. That if the party says the sky is red, you have to say the sky is red. You have to, and I think that does a serious disservice when you have to pause your disbelief to please someone else for either their feelings or their strengths that they want to impose on you, anything else. I think if you have to lean into ridiculousness, something gets lost. And that's, now I do want to ask, and then I want to get back to Belt and Roads and talk about BRICS, and I want to talk about the
China Marshall Plan is what I'm most unfamiliar with. We have to hit that.
But as you're growing up in this culture, we're all familiar with, I shouldn't say we all, because we have listeners who aren't, but under communist systems, they have what we call over here struggle sessions.
Yeah.
Did they have those in China? Were those because I didn't hear about those as much in China.
I can tell you one thing. I grew up in Shanghai. Shanghai is the most open city in China, let's say, because, the culture is a much Western influence. In Shanghai, we had a British concession, French concession, in the early 1920s, all the traditional major powers built their own concessions within the city of Shanghai. So Shanghai is a very much cosmopolitan this way. I mean,
the Chinese people I knew, funny enough, were all from Nanking or Nanjing, from the old capital that, and they, even though that had the same thing, had a lot different.
It's a sophisticated city, Nanjing. Nanjing, it's a very nice city. I've been there a couple of times as well. They have one major university that is, highly respected, and it's the old capital of Kuomintang, the National Party. When they lost their battle against communists, they moved to Taiwan. That's where the People's Republic is the mainland. Then you have the Republic of China, that is Taiwan, the modern Taiwan. So Chiang Kai-shek with his children, with his wife, they all moved to Taiwan after 1949, when they lost the capital of Nanking. Yes.
Yeah, they were all from there, and there's still a very strong tradition there of from the people that I've met from Nanking, of they do not like the Japanese at all.
Of course. We had the Nanking massacre. Yeah,
the rape of Nanking, if you're not familiar with it, it is as brutal a story as you'd ever read. It is brutal. And the Japanese were, and if we have Japanese listeners, I'm not trying to offend you, you're different people now, but you were, your Confucianism allowed you to be rather cold, and the things you did to China in World War II, what was it, Unit 782 or whatever, it is the stuff of nightmares. I mean, They did
Unit 731.
731 or 732. But
America still kept the data for themselves, though.
because of
But
them,
that's what I tell people in China. You have to appreciate American. American, the only friend of China during the Second World War. Look, the Chinese got all the help from America. Our best university, even today in Beijing, Beida, Tsinghua, it's all built by Americans, by American missionaries. I mean, American people did the most as a foreign power to China than anyone else. The British just took everything from China, during the Yuan massacre.
Yeah.
British just stole everything from China, not Americans. So, I think the Chinese, the current leadership should understand that. I mean, there's still a lot of space for dialogue between the two nations because it's, we are interconnected in a way, even though we're different. I mean, there's no modern China without America.
Yeah.
Truly.
And you could argue there's no today's America without China.
Yeah, all the toys are made in China. That's
not just the toys, but the computer we're talking on,
the lead
these microphones, everything, and China is now facing that industrialization loss as Indonesia starts coming into the fore.
Vietnam as well.
Vietnam. So it's a cycle. I mean, the Great Britain and France lost it to us.
Yeah.
We lost it to China. China's losing it to Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. And they're going to lose it to someone else because it's like growing up. You start out as a child, and then you become a young adult, and that's when you're industrious. And then you become older and you want more things. That's when you want to consume the industry of someone else. And then you become old, and that's when you're like Great Britain and you just sit over there and do weird shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very good, what you talk about. It's very true. Very true.
Now, I hear in China, in the China leadership, there's a culture of revenge for the Opium Wars and the Boxer Rebellion and all that. But there's also a culture of we're the oldest empire and we're going to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's called the revitalization of the Chinese nation. That's what Xi Jinping always try to sell.
Always.
And it's based on that. That's why I had a dissertation I made in 2020. It was published by a British journal. I talked about it. It's called the 100 years of humiliation, the Chinese nation, because we suffered the Opium War, we suffered the Sino-Japanese War, as you talked about earlier, about the Nanking massacre, for example. So the Chinese has a lot of wounds, and we have to sort of heal ourselves. This is what driven the nation to be together. Actually, it's based on tragedy. It's not based on something that is psychologically healthy. It's sort of like you have this kind of a victim psychology here.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that as China further industrializes, moves through the industrialization, that they do heal, and regardless of what government they choose, they don't enter the world stage with a chip on their shoulders.
100%. That's a major difference here, because in America, you can go everywhere in this country. You find about like self-help book, positive psychology. In China, it's different. China is about being a victim, blaming others.
Really?
It's a very different sort of cultural approach. Psychological approach.
Really? So the Chinese culture is like, and
it's about suffering. It's about suffering. It's sort of like a Russian, I was compare. I'm now doing another dissertation, actually, compare three different powers, Chinese, Russians, and the sort of, I call the liberal West. The liberal West, that's basically the Anglo-Saxon, the Americans and British tradition. It's very different. Because both the Chinese and Russians are much about suffering. If you look at the art creation, like the Swan Lake, for example, the Russian Swan Lake, the final act it's about death. It's about, they sort of trying to glorify death. That's a very, very dangerous, That's why Russians, they feel good about, being dead.
Maybe that's why Russia has such beautiful art.
Yes, but the beautiful arts are coming from the continental Europe, because during the reign of Catherine the Great, she hijacked all the great artists from the continental Europe, from Netherlands, from France, to create masterpieces. Well, I visit the Hermitage Museum.
You don't get a Habsburg princess, move her to Russia, put her in charge of the geographically at the time largest country on earth, and she doesn't rape and pillage all the beautiful things from everywhere else. I do like Catherine the Great. I think she's an interesting figure. Her husband Peter, also kind of interesting, but in the opposite way. But see, when all the Chinese people I've talked to, this victim conversation strikes me weird, because I've always known them to be very studious and hardworking and I've not to complain. So that must be an internal type victim mentality.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because America is not really the enemy of China, because, even during the Opium War whatsoever, of course, America was also one of the 8 great power that, had a problem with China, but anything American did was not major, didn't cause any kind of major damage to China. Of course, during the Second World War, America was helping China. Then we have during the 60s, China had a problem with Russia, with USSR during the time. It was also, Kissinger came over, and America made a very strong statement that if USSR strike a nuclear attack on China, America will also, attack Russia. So I really believe our two nations are great friends in a way. I mean, there's so much. Of course, we have a problem with differences, but we can work out. So when it comes to American people, I think the Chinese in general are less complaint than, for example, towards British people or the European nations, for example. Because they brought more hurt towards China, particularly the British. China had a major problem now with Britain, even right now.
Well, I mean, let's just look at the Opium Wars, where Great Britain didn't have anything to sell you, so they forced by gunpoint you to purchase the opium that Great Britain bought so that they could steal all your silks and textiles.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what happened. And they did it.
Is the form of a covered warfare. We talk about the modern warfare. I think Britain's very smart. They dropped the entire nation of China in order to have an advantage over China.
The crazy thing was,
very smart.
It wasn't even Great Britain proper. It was that East India Company.
And who controlled that? It's the Astor family. It's the same family.
It's crazy that family. That family ran the world for about 40 years. Ran the world.
400 years.
Well, the East, you had the Dutch India Company first, but then when it went to the East India Company, they made decisions for continents, and it was made all in mercantilism commerce.
Well, everybody wants good stuff. So.
It was insane. That's a truly, I don't know whether to say evil or impressive, because it was both. It's wild.
They're masterminds, but not in a sort of, I don't want to judge them, but
judge away.
The modern history is sort of hijacked by this group of people for the past 400 years. That's why, like Putin, Xi Jinping trying to make a revolt, it doesn't make a difference. People run this system for more than 400 years. Well, you try to destroy this within 10 years? That's impossible.
Not going to happen. Well, and that's another question. China and Russia are getting buddy right now, but traditionally they're not friends.
No.
I mean, Vietnam was Russia's patsy, and Cambodia was China's patsy, and they went to war right after the U.S. left. And it was a bloodier, longer war than when the U.S. Now, over here, we don't know about it because there's no scarring or nothing else. But Russia and China aren't friends, or traditionally aren't friends. And there's a lot of skepticism that they're piling up right now just to gain strength on the world stage. And then whoever comes out on top is going to backstab the other.
But you must understand, Russia's economy is very weak. It's only it's only 5% of the Chinese size. And how can Russia?
It's not even Italy's economy.
Well, they make those dolls that go inside of each other, right?
Yeah, they probably don't even make that anymore. Russia has almost no economy anymore.
Yeah, Russia is like a balloon. Inside, it's empty. There's nothing inside. Mm-hmm. Russia is punching it's punching the bag bigger than itself in order to show it's still an eminent power, but it's not an eminent power anymore. That's why Russia is losing itself right now in Ukraine. Ukraine, you get all the support from America, from NATO members. What does Russia have? Nothing. Russia is a poor country today. Let's put it that way. It's also a very corrupt country run by the oligarchs. So there's no strength in Russia anymore. So before, during the Cold War, China is the little brother of Russia. But today, I think Russia is the little brother of China.
I don't even think little brother is. I think it's like the cancerous neighbor down the street.
If China attacked Russia right now, would the world even care?
Oh,
it's still a nuclear power. You don't want to.
Yeah. Now that is one thing. Russia, we don't know how their nuclear stuff is still, if it's all rusty and if it'll still ignite, but we do know that Russia has a lot of nukes. There's only one place that has more nukes than Russia. Maybe. We hope.
Where?
Us.
No.
Yeah.
Probably not, man.
But no, the numbers are quite close because Russia raped and pillaged all their neighbors and focused, once they learned how to make nukes, that's all they focused on.
Yeah, that's all they focus on, even till today. That's the problem of Russia. Russia is too big. It doesn't have any kind of a major industry. There's not a single multinational corporation from Russia. Think about it. This is very, very dangerous. It's a very poor, but it's so obsessed with power, with lands. It's
obsessed with defense.
Yeah. It's so big. It's such a big, but it's underdeveloped.
It's frozen. It's frozen. Russia is a damn hellscape. Most of it, the tundra, the steppe. I mean, all of that is damn near unusable.
Yeah, it's rich though because it has all the natural resources. We know this very well. Timbers. The Russians, of course, have natural gas, like everything. But then again, it's not sustainable in the long run because it doesn't have a solid industry base. Yeah. So
it hasn't done well on building up an educated populace.
Yeah.
Where China,
Russia declining, that's for sure. Yes.
I think China's true strength is building an educated populace. China has done very well at that.
Yeah, if you look at QS rankings of the universities, yes, and the top 100 universities in the world, China now occupy at least 20, I believe. But when you look at Russia, not a single one. Maybe one, like ranked like number 92 or something, University of Moscow. But, it's very sad. It's from eminent power to today's Russia. It's a story of tragedy.
It is. And I think,
And their internet system is just as firewalled up as China's is it not?
Yeah, true. But China, it's a different. That's why I'm always talks about that. Both China and Russia shares this kind of obsession of control because this we talked about authoritarian tradition. Yeah.
Yep.
Power grasping. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, Russia, I mean, Russia was the last monarchical peasant country in the world. Although you could argue China in the rural areas still lived like that, but not like, I mean, Russia, the peasants still were owned by the noblemen. You know, Lenin's father became a mayor of a town right before Lenin became an activist. And essentially he had to buy the town, which meant buy the peasants to be the nobleman of that town. So he had to build up money and purchase his noblemanship. Now he wasn't a regional nobleman, but so I mean, yeah, Russia, they never broke those chains.
Yes.
So
because traditionally speaking, the country of Russia never entered the European Enlightenment.
No,
nor it had a Renaissance. You see, so it's sort of detached from the continental European culture. But the Russians still see themselves as a European power, but they got never accepted by the continental Europe. So throughout the history, Russia has this inferior complexity problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It sees itself as something important, but not judged by the others, unfortunately. So today, they have no choice but working with the Chinese. But the Russian I should never respect China, because to them, they still believe they are the Europeans. They're superior.
That, and they also
Russia had no choice but to work with China. But China must understand, Russia cannot be trusted.
No. Well, I think also Russia looks at China with the CCP and says, we gave you your government.
Yes.
We gave
Actually, the German gives because the Marxism.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. The Germans, let's just face it, the Germans gave everyone a lot of government.
So during the White Paper Revolution, many people say, the Chinese Communist Party blame, all these influence are from foreign countries. So people say, even the CCP is from foreign countries. It's from Germany originally.
But yeah.
Not in England, right?
But the CCP works exactly like any Confucianism bureaucracy had before then.
Yes.
It works just like it with all of the positives and negatives that come with it.
So if the CCP builds this Belt and Road Initiative and expands the economy beyond the borders of China in a way that seems pretty free market ideologically to me, how will the CCP hold control?
China's partners in this entire road and Belt and Road project are, most European countries are withdrawn. They are not interested. Even Estonia says, we don't want to be a part of this anymore, So, for example, China only got this kind of semi-dictatorship state. For example, Belarus, Serbia. You have countries like this. In Africa, they build the military base in Djibouti, for example. All these countries share one thing. It's a one-man show, right? So the democratic countries don't want to be a part of this entire Road and Belt initiative.
Yeah.
Not actively, at least. Only those countries share the similar political structure as China want to be a part of it. That is Serbia. That is countries in Eastern Europe, mainly.
That's any kind of.
I did case studies on this very clearly. It demonstrates. And I looked at successful cases in this. You have Hungary. In Hungary, very well, it's a one guy. This guy, he's anti the entire democratic system of the West. Of course, I see his reason. Of course, as we talk about this, progressive liberals are destroying the entire Western, the fundamental principle of democracy, in fact. So, and then you have characters like this, the sort of the populists, states. That's China's partner for Belt and Road Initiative.
That's still a large audience in the end.
Yes.
Do you think, this is a side question, do you think that Western societies are hell-bent on destroying themselves right now?
I think, tradition as we talk about in the 90s, I think that's the golden time of the West. But
Oh
right
yeah.
now we have so many mini celebrities, I call mini celebrities. They are so eager to be seen. These political figures, they want to be famous. They want to build their own legacy. They don't care about people. Of course, they talk about people, but it's more for themselves, for their own next 3 generations.
Just like power politics in play.
Yeah, people like these young guys, the Canadian prime minister. Now you have this Indian guy in UK. All these little brats, I'm sorry to say. These are the typical Western elites. Elites.
That's a good thing you bring up because what's his name in Canada? Pierre's boy. Gosh dang it.
Trudeau. What's
Trudeau,
his-
yeah.
Fidel Castro. Junior. Fidel Jr. Anyways, he is the son of Pierre Trudeau. Pierre was a socialist. He was all those bad things, but he was also a dynamic leader. He got a lot of stuff done. And he got it done without leaving a huge bad taste in the mouth of his opposition.
Yeah.
And Trudeau is a buffoon.
Yeah.
Everything he does, and Trudeau would be nowhere without the media cheerleading for him. And he leaves a
And
bad
his family's legacy, of course, too.
Yeah. So he reminds me of when you read about the end of monarchy building up, between that time of World War I and World War II, where Wilhelm took over and Nicholas, and that the world that all had monarchical systems all at one time, who had great leaders just prior, their kids take over and they are buffoons. All of them. Wilhelm was a buffoon. Nicholas was a buffoon. The Habsburgs, we don't know how that would have turned out because, someone.
They had a genetic problem because they marry each other.
But also
what
he got
happened to Habsburg.
he got killed. He got killed before it all. I mean, he got killed in the lead up to it.
They could never take over the Swiss.
But it's weird in that time, the last right before World War I, it was all a failure of these kids of great, maybe not great, but effective leaders ended up taking the mantle, and they were ineffective, and they caused the fall of the world.
Yeah, they say it's slipping on silk slippers.
Yeah.
Well,
that's where we are. I mean, China's on the come up. They're earning their way right now. And right now we're living fat and happy in America, Maybe that's what it is.
That's true. That's why China feels it has an upper hand, because China also understands the demographic and the cultural changes within the USA. And we see this, during the Black Lives Matters, like everything, the Chinese understand the internal frictions within the American societies. And that gives China an advantage over America, because China is a homogeneous country.
Yeah.
And, the sort of the synergy among people can be united. But in America, it's difficult.
Well, not just that.
Society that is difficult. You go to Sweden, they have the same problem. You go to Germany, they have the same problem. France has the same problem. It's this multiculturalism problem. And how West can overcome the disadvantage of multiculturalism, that's a challenge for the future.
Well, and going back to China's problem with population collapse, how long do you think before we see China making maneuvers to bring in immigrants to bolster their workforce?
China will never do that, I believe. China will only encourage what China doing right now, strategic-wise, is, as we talked about before, with all these countries like Eastern Europe, because, we had a demographic crisis because there's a disbalance between the genders. So China actually now have an Eastern European woman married to Chinese guys. You have China now. If you look at Chinese like YouTube, you have guys going to Ukraine every day to get married with Ukrainian women. It's amazing. We have
Ukraine
so
makes
many
some beautiful
children
women.
nowadays in China.
I'm telling the Chinese, get it done. Some of those Ukraine women are drop dead
Russia
gorgeous.
as well, from the Siberian part of Russia, and so yeah, that's what's going to happen. But I was watching a video, I think 2 years ago, about the professor from the Chinese Academy of Social Science. He talks about, he says, just let America be. America will destroy itself. Why? Because they look at the demographic changes in America.
Yeah.
There won't be Anglo-Saxon Americans anymore, like in 50 years.
Well, it's not just...
Then America will disintegrate itself. It won't be an eminent power anymore. There's another guy you know very well. He wrote the book, the Clash of the Civilizations, Huntington. Before his death, he wrote a book. He talks about the same thing.
Well, it's not just that.
Anglo-Saxon culture of America will be destroyed by 2050. By then, America won't be there anymore. If you replace the entire population, I'm sorry to say, from Latin America, how can you sustain America? You cannot.
Latin
you will
America,
not have a USA anymore.
Latin America
is China sees as an advantage for China.
Latin America is another society that likes to have a strong man at the top too.
But you see, then again, we talked about the capacity. You need a human capital.
Yeah,
human capital is very important.
Well,
to sustain a country like a first world country, it's about population. It's about your competence. It's about what's here. That's very important. If America losing that, America will lose everything. It's not just about buying all the machines, have all the nukes. It's about being here as well. You have nukes, but you need to have people know how to run it correctly.
Well, that should be scary. That should also be scary for the rest of the world too.
Well, if that's such an important
very
variable.
Scary. I mean, those things you're not supposed to talk about, but I think you are a little bit conservative, your channel. So I decide actually it's a very important topic to be covered.
Yeah. Well, the rest of the world should be scared that, let's face it, America has blundered plenty, but on the historic stage, America has been a force for good in the world.
Yeah.
More than
Britain.
Compared to
what? Look, the British Prime Minister today.
Everything.
I mean, that guy is strongly believing caste. He doesn't think like a British person. He wear Prada shoes everywhere. He carries he wear Louis Vuitton jackets everywhere. I mean, that's not a typical sort of like a leader from the democratic societies.
Now the standard is not set too high. Just to put that out there. I mean, like, America is the great good of the world, but the standard is not that high.
Well, no, I'm just saying, if you average it out, the United States has been more good than bad.
Yeah, that's
on
true.
The world
it's
stage.
Eminent power. It's eminent power with military hegemony. That's very important. Number one, militarily, you can sort of a balancing. They call it offshore balancing every country in the world. That's the strength of America. But China doesn't have that.
I mean, imagine had we given this power to, imagine had we given this to pre-World War I Germany. They would have taken over all of Africa.
Well, even France. I mean, France
would have finally gotten England for England taking the Burgundian.
I don't know. I'm not trying to be offensive, but the French French people are good at, for example, culture, music, food, whatever. But when it comes to the economic development, I'm not sure if they are.
They're good at taking over other people's economic development.
We're talking theoreticals.
Anglo-Saxon people are good at this,
Yeah,
but not the French people, not even the Iberians, not the Spanish, not the Italians. Look their economy today, even.
Yeah.
So when it comes to conducting, the economy, Germans, they also have a little bit the parliamentary system with the welfare system, So it's more humane in many ways. But when it comes to the competitiveness, I think it's still the Anglo-Saxon people can design the top system.
On a side note, I studied this once. Why Anglo-Saxon seems to rise up. And I didn't study it. I read an excerpt on why. And I heard it was because of the layout of the language. The way the language takes accountability for stuff. I messed this up. Whereas in French, they say, that messed up and I was in the vicinity of it when it happened. By the way they lay out their words,
Sure.
And I heard that that's why all the dialects, so German and English and Dutch, English, Deutsch, and that because of that layout, they all have that same layout.
Makes sense.
And because of that, it made communication that much clearer that it caused them to have more industriousness. That's just something I read. I don't know, people that study languages, remember, I am a moron that can sometimes remember stuff I read.
It sounds like
ago.
a good theory, Jared. But back on the variable of population exchange. I was watching a video today. I posted it on my Facebook. We're entering an era where we're talking about gestating our own human beings in factories and enhancing them with CRISPRs, and I don't know, before you know it, we'll be making orcs or something. But
before you know it, we'll be having our genitals removed because they just get in the way. That's when we become gray aliens, and that's it.
I really believe in the next few years that population variable is going to be a little strange. In fact, I think we're not far from gestating our own type in an artificial womb.
So do you think we'll gestate biological androids to be our workers, or do you think we're going to build mechanical ones?
You'll have to ask Elon Musk that question.
Yeah. AI is coming up, and you even today in China, if you go to a bank in Shanghai, any transaction below $6,000, you will have a robot serving you. You will have an AI robot serving you.
You're not worthy of a person. You get the computer.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a question of course, that's a very deep question of the spiritual discussion. Well, unfortunately, I think this is a scope beyond my knowledge.
Yeah, me too. And my only question is if AI shows up to where it is the Skynet AI, will we even know about it? Because I think once it appears, it's already too late. But okay, I wanted to ask, I do think that's interesting that you see Chinese men, because China is a lopsided population, going to Eastern Europe to obtain wives.
Well, what happens to their citizenship? Because if you're Chinese, you can only have one citizenship, correct?
What happens is this woman will get a Chinese green card, of course, permanent green card after a few years. The children, of course, they will be Chinese nationals. This is happening every day because you even have marriage agencies now in China, organize trips for Chinese men, go to Eastern Europe, to Ukraine, to Moldova, to all these, ex-countries, ex-Soviet countries to hook up with the local woman, So it was amazing.
And those women are beautiful. They're traditional. They're
usually it's from the village. That's why I always tell people, I say, if it's hard. I mean, if you try to get a girl from Moscow, a middle-class girl from Moscow, from St. Petersburg, it's not easy. So they're from Siberia, from Ukraine, of course. Ukraine is a completely destroyed country.
Yeah.
So people are desperate. So there's so many Chinese men nowadays getting wives from Ukraine. So this war for Chinese men, it's good, way. Good opportunities.
Got to go over and get that Helga. I dig it.
Yeah, it's a quite the marriage agency. They charge something, I don't know, something like $20,000, I believe. Wow. To have a guaranteed solution for you. I mean, Ukrainian women are smart, beautiful. Yeah. So why not? Why not? They can learn language easily. When I was in Kiev about let me see, when was it? 2014. I met women on the street. They speak Chinese. Amazing.
So they're
Ukrainian
gearing up. They're
women
ready
speak
for you
Chinese.
guys. They're
So,
gearing up.
yeah, it's beyond imagination. I was like, wow, where did you learn Chinese? They say, oh, our university offers a very comprehensive Chinese program. So it's very popular. And so for them, many of them, they want to get a visa, go to China, because China still is a much better country than Ukraine.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Well, you're not getting bombed in China. Now we're in Tooele, Utah, and we have how many? 4 elementary schools, and all of our elementary schools have they call it the immersion program. So Grantsville, our neighbor town, has French, and we have German, and we have, I believe, Mandarin. So each elementary school has an immersion program where they focus on one foreign language, and half of their day or half of their school time is taught in a foreign language.
Yeah, some kids are even speaking Brazilian Portuguese to Patricia now.
Yeah,
on her own street.
Yeah,
Oh.
and I think that's an awesome thing. I think China, or any of the Chinese, China has what, 5 different major languages or something.
Dialect we have, like a 4 or 5. But it's very interesting, because I'm making some international arrangement with people, like a travel, the business visit, and it's amazing when you go to Eastern Europe nowadays. There's so many women speaks fluent Chinese. It's just like
They're looking for that husband. Those women are smart. They're
Belarus. This other day I was talking with. She got her master's degree from China.
You
She
need to
got
be
her
careful.
master's
One of
from
these
Shanghai. She's like teaching Chinese as a second language, master in teaching Chinese as a second language.
One of these
Her
women are
Chinese is
going to
beautiful.
steal
She can-
you
she
off the
can-
street.
Yeah,
One of
she
them
can
are going to grab you.
compose Chinese poetry in Chinese.
Oh, yeah. You're going to walk by, and one of them's going to grab you and think you're going to make that good life for them. They're going to snatch you
Yeah,
up.
you are sugar daddy.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
we
also
call it
the
corn
thing I
syrup in
tell
America.
I tell guys, I say, get a woman from, if you like a non-Chinese woman, get someone from a proper country. I'm sorry to say, but those countries are not reliable. Maybe they speak our language, but you don't know what's behind, You have to be very careful, especially if you have some money. So be careful.
I don't know. Do they have prenups in China?
Their guys are crazy in China nowadays. It's not like China 30 years ago. I mean, those guys, they do anything. Their money, they call it yuppies. They have money, they have the jobs and apartments in the city center, drive like a Ferrari. Those guys, they were paid 20,000 to get a wife from Eastern Europe. Why not?
I don't blame him. Well, yeah. I mean, that's another, not to mention that would probably become a status symbol.
True. That's the thing. It's encouraged by the Chinese government, because the road and belt, it's usually those countries,
Yeah.
All the way from Central Asia, you have Kazakhstan, you have Kyrgyzstan, then you all the way to Belarus, all these countries, Georgia, Armenia, So those are the belt and the road.
Now, the belt.
You marry up the entire, corridor, they call it.
Hey,
corridor.
if you can't get them to join you, breed them into you.
The love canal.
Yeah, that's the strategy. Very true.
Breed them in. Now, what do you think? My thoughts on the Belt and the Road is that it's an economic model so that China can. I think China's going to have to start practicing modern mercantilism. Because China has some raw goods, but they don't have the whole of the raw goods spectrum. So I think we're going to see China wants to continue their industrial nature and industrial growth. So the Belt and Road's going to support that, so they can get heavy metals from Afghanistan, so they can get these things and bring them back to China and build the future products. Am I wrong on that?
Yes, you are correct. It's a way to sort of observe Chinese industry capacity, because China, about 20 years ago, China started, the western part of China is relatively backward. So the China industrialization started there to sort of boost up the entire country. And so there's so much industry capacity was left. There's nowhere to use it anymore. So that's why China start up this entire project of building the road to sort of shift the Chinese model, the Chinese industrialization model to other countries. They built exactly the same port in other countries as in China, the exactly same trade zones as within China. For example, in Belarus, I give you an example. It's called the Greystone Industry Park. They have something like 15 square miles land obtained by the Chinese government from the Belarusian government, the lease for like 90 years. So they built everything like in China on that side. You have the restaurant, you have Chinese banks, you have Chinese factories, Chinese Huawei, regional headquarters and everything.
And
just
a
like
McDonald's. Let's just face it. In the end of days, McDonald's is going to run the world.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's everywhere.
American soft power.
That's
then
like
all the
Oakland.
girls running around there speak Chinese. The blonde Belarusian woman speak Chinese. You will be surprised. You'll be shocked.
Well, honestly, if you think about it, Belarus is a former Soviet nation sitting just to the east of Russia. It's Russia's last really true friend. And they're probably begging China to come in and give them any help. And so the women are going to see these Chinese nationals come in that are engineers, that are construction workers, and those are going to be the wealthiest guys in the state.
Yeah, true. That's what's happening right now. And the world is moving towards a very interesting, landscape right now. I mean, I couldn't believe this. I grew up in China. I couldn't believe this when I was young, for example. China will grow into such kind of, I don't know, it's like a monster, a sort of like a unrecognized monster,
Linjie, can you go back to China if you wanted to?
Not at the moment, because I was appointed by an international organization in 2015. They appointed me as ambassador to China, but the foreign ministry of China didn't want to approve me for some reasons. So, I lost this kind of a golden opportunity, but I believe I want to wait. I don't know what's going to happen. Right now in China, everybody want to move out of China. And anybody with a little bit power, a little bit money, they don't want to stay in China, because this Xi Jinping makes China very insecure. Because, during his reign in the past 10 years, the economy has been shrinked. And also people's livelihood has been strongly negatively influenced.
It is wild.
People are not happy. Average people are not happy. They want to get out.
It is wild from the outside looking in. Xi Jinping, he got in charge, and you're right. He is kind of a jealous actor, but China has gained more in the time he's in charge from other nations. The UN named China, they took Taiwan off the ledger and put China in and all that. And he's acted more jealous at every turn. That's interesting. You bring that up.
Because, China had this called wolf pack diplomacy. You probably heard about this term. That the Chinese diplomatic service become more aggressive towards the foreign actors. It's not like before. Before, during Deng Xiaoping's time, says you must reserve your energy and being friendly towards everybody. So therefore, you can save such energy to develop your own economy. But today, that's not the case anymore. Yeah, they become very aggressive. Look what happens during 2 months ago, the Chinese consulate in Manchester, United Kingdom. They beat up the protesters on the side. You saw that.
Yeah, that was like was it the British ambassador grabbed the protester and started
the Chinese consul. The Chinese consul.
Yeah, the consul
grabbed the people from outside the gate and took them in, kicked their ass.
Grabbed him by the hair and drug him in there. And that was insane. And then what he said about it is, it's my duty as a Chinese person to do this. And you're like,
Can you believe it?
You're a diplomat.
Were those British citizens, or were they just more Chinese people
They were
living abroad?
Chinese expats.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, I guess I kind of see his point.
But even then, could you imagine if a story came out that a U.S. consular, or let's even say a U.S. Marine guarding an embassy in China, grabbed a U.S. expat and drug him inside and beat him up?
Yeah, imagine that.
That Marine would be sent home in disgrace, let alone a diplomat.
That's why, the problem of China is the Communist parties of China doesn't understand the basic principle of being civilized. That's the problem, because these people from the Chinese Communist Party, starting from Mao Zedong, they are hooligans. They were hooligans. They were not the educated class,
Well, that's all. Isn't that all communist?
China.
Isn't that all communist parties? I mean,
yeah, civilization and communism, it's not like peanut butter and chocolate.
Well, I mean,
it just doesn't mix.
Right.
Let's look at it. Lenin was a bomb thrower even though his dad was a lord.
Hooligan,
Stalin
right.
was a bank robber. I mean, let's look at what
they are thugs. They are thugs. That's the problem.
Yeah. What did Pol Pot do? Pol Pot was a agricultural supremacist, so he killed anyone that wore glasses or spoke with a certain dialect or knew two languages, or he killed
100%.
1/3 of his country.
That's true.
How insane is that?
True.
Killed 1/3. 1 out of 4 people got murdered under, or one out of 3 people got murdered under Pol Pot.
It's crazy.
But that wasn't real communism.
Good point.
The communism only works in a country, for example, like Sweden, because, the people has accomplished high materialization and also high, it's based on welfare. That's the true communism. But even though that become a multicultural Sweden today, doesn't work anymore.
Well,
Sweden in the 1980s was one of the best countries in the world.
Yep.
The GDP per capita ahead of America.
Well, they spent all their money. They spent all the money that they made by selling guns to other countries at war. They did that for 200 years. Yeah. They became the wealthiest nation on earth. Yeah. And then they said, okay,
now look
now let's go communist. And then in what was it, 2004, their socialist minister of finance, he's a socialist on the Socialist Party, came out and said, we got to stop being socialist.
Yeah.
Got to sell more guns.
I used to like Sweden so much when I went there in early 2001. It was such a beautiful country. Then everything changed within 10 years, because then they're taking everybody from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Somalia. Then it's become like what Donald Trump would say, a shithole. It really become a shithole, unfortunately. And so today you don't even feel safe anymore if you are a woman, if you are like a Swedish woman walking down the street in the night in Stockholm. It's the raping capital of the world. It's very dangerous. It's not like before anymore. Very sad. That's why I also believe the nice Western societies are also being destroyed day by day today.
Well, homogeneous countries provide a security because there's that automatic trust when it's deeper than skin color. When you have the same religion, the same background, the same historical representatives to look up to. And that's why homogeneous cultures can dalliance into socialism.
Yeah, that's what the American social scientist, I think his name is Putnam from Harvard, he even studying about it. He calculated like 40 different communities across the U.S. states. He also, the conclusion is the more homogeneous, where is the highest social capital? Utah is number 1, I think. Utah, where you live.
Yeah, because all the Mormons.
North Dakota again. Then it's Minnesota.
Well, it's because, what about Wyoming? Did Wyoming not even count? Wyoming's got a population of 8. And, Beth is pregnant, so it'll be 9 in 3 weeks.
I'm sure it's on the list. But the thing is, the least trusted place is like Los Angeles, San Francisco, all this multicultural pot, unfortunately. I mean, this tells us the reality. But of course, you cannot say so. If you say so, you are not politically correct. But as a foreigner myself, I mean, that's what I truly believe, because I did a lot of social science on this subject. I studied comprehensively in this topic, social capital theory.
And it's
social capital, social
yeah.
trust.
Well, and that's another thing you got to look at is homogeneous cultures. Like I think we could do a universal healthcare system if we figured out how to run it on a county or at the most a county level.
But Jared, let me ask you this: homogeneous, if that makes things more safe, it's not like you're going to see many white people walking down the streets of Mogadishu. Everybody's going to look the same over there, and I don't think it's safe.
Well, actually, Mogadishu, homogeneous doesn't just mean texture of skin. It's also, I mean, they've got tribes. The Hutus and the Tutsis, to you and me, look exactly the same.
But then they kill each other.
But they are genetically very distant, and they live in the same towns.
But the problem is, what kind of homogeneity? That's also the question. You are right.
You've got religion, you've got language,
religion,
dialect, you've got national history. The guys driving around where they've got the country they're from's flag in the back window of their pickup truck. They're breaking up homogeneity. And I'm not saying they're wrong, but that's a break from it.
Like in Minnesota, for example, very high social trust, just like in Scandinavia. So they say it's very consistent.
Well, they're all German.
Back 100 years ago, in countries like Norway and Sweden, the structure of the farmland is exactly the same. Mm-hmm. When the father gets older, they give the house to their son. They move to a smaller house next to it. The same thing is still practicing in Scandinavia today, among the indigenous Scandinavians. So it's very interesting. So the social trust does travel along with the people. So it's very interesting. It doesn't matter where they move to. If the same people, they keep the same tradition. Today they are American, but their heritage, they're Scandinavian. So the social trust stays.
Yeah. And it's deeper than just skin color. Everyone hangs on to skin color, but you've got your religion, you've got your dialect.
The crime too, the sort of crime, the whole conduct of the crime, the same people, if they move to other continent, they do the same. It's very interesting. It's just, it's very consistent,
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Nigerian Americans. Nigeria is probably the country that's doing the best in Africa. Yeah. On the whole, on all measurements, they're doing the best. And when Nigerians come over to the United States, they do better than white Americans economically.
Yeah.
They outperform white Americans.
Also Cameroon, they are very smart people from that country, very well educated. You look at even the countries like Iran, even though they have a very screwed up political system, Iranian people are very smart. They're different as other Arabs. They're not Arabs, first of all. And there are a lot of doctors, engineers, and they come to America to succeed too.
Yeah, they're
so very interesting.
They're the real Caucasians from the Caucasus Mountains.
Of course, among Caucasus.
Yeah,
sure, the Georgians, the Armenian, but then you had the Ottoman Empire. That's how everything become.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what happened.
I love studying history. I love studying people. Now, we've got to let you go here in a minute because Dave's wife is already calling him and he's going to be yelled at. But what do you think the future is in the upcoming year? Well, okay, I wanted to talk to Dave about this and I want to bring you in. China and Taiwan, there has been some saber rattling there over the last 3 years, but it got a little louder last year. And I wonder if the war in Ukraine may have changed that saber rattling? Because the war in Ukraine, one, it did two things. The war in Ukraine showed us the next war, the individual drone use. The war in Ukraine showed us it was like stepping into World War I and being introduced to the Maxim gun or the tank. I wonder do you think that has changed China's stance on invading and conquering Taiwan? Also, the way the United States supported Ukraine. I mean, there was a lot of monetary, intelligence, special forces targeting, economic disruption. Do you think that any of that war in Ukraine may have affected any plans, or do you think there were really even plans of taking Taiwan?
I think Taiwan will still stay as status quo. What happens is if you see the election about a few weeks ago, everything changed from the progressive Democratic Party from Taiwan. Mrs. Tsai, she has stepped down. So now it's the National Party, and taking over Taiwan. And they are more pro-China. They are more
I know. It's the same party that Chiang Kai-shek was a member of, that left mainland and went over there. Taiwan went through this progressive growth, became extremely left-wing, and then the party that takes back over, Chiang Kai-shek's party, is pro-communist China. It's a shocking thing. I love it.
It's not a pro-communist China, because the original aim of the National Party is basically use Taiwan's base to sort of take over mainland. That's the original. But today, that's impossible. Today, that sounds like a fairy tale, right?
Mm-hmm. I would like to see, honestly, my honest opinion is I would like to see the two of them figure out how to work together economically. Because let's face it, Taiwan is the computer chip capital of the world.
Yeah, if we lose them.
If China invades Taiwan, we're going to enter the dark ages for 10 years. We're going to have to learn how to use typewriters again a year into it. And, it's just true. But if they figured out how to work together, like, the story of Hyundai, the car manufacturer, right? Yeah. How he's a North Korean who escaped to South Korea, but then he started up this car company, and now he has a car company that blends the two countries together and enriches North Korea just a little bit. And, him and Korean Christians are going to be the reason North Korea falls when it does. So I would like to see something like that happen, because I think industry, wherever it happens, is a positive for the world.
Yes, for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
But I think what's going to happen with Taiwan is it will just be status quo. Sooner or later, I still believe in that the Chinese CCP will be over. It's a matter of time, because it's like anything. It's been there for too long. It's not it's not a good party, and the people suffer. During the COVID lockdown, where you have seen the zero COVID policy of China, people are really fed up. So right now, people are protesting everywhere. Of course, the mainstream media doesn't want to tell you, and we know who's controlling the American media as well. It's the same people supporting China. And so what I really believe is in the future, maybe sooner, who knows, there will be an eruption inside China. And then the CCP will step down. Then the history will enter into a new chapter.
Do you think China will go with I don't know if China can go without this Confucianism style government.
That's the problem. I mean, look the case of Singapore. Singapore is a successful case with the Confucianism because it's a very small country, so it's easy. But Confucianism is not compatible for the modern society.
I know that's but China is going to be modern. They've got a taste for it now.
Yeah. Once you get it, it doesn't go away.
That's the problem of Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping trying to use Confucianism to strengthen China, but that's not going to happen because Confucianism versus modernity, it's like, it's like a water and a fire. You will cancel each other, right?
Well, Confucianism has never been a conquering society either.
No, it's about control. It's about the so-called maintain harmony, but that's all BS. What's really trying to achieve is to have a social division. Or those people who has power will always maintain power. Those people being oppressed will always being oppressed. That's the essence of Confucius. Confucius has nothing good to offer. That's my personal opinion, of course. I mean, there's a lot of academic debates on this.
It's so ingrained in China. It's China's. It's so ingrained in them.
I tell you, the most sophisticated faith of China is actually the Taoism. Taoism believe, you don't have to conquer anything. Just be as nature. You have to create harmony, not with people, but with nature. Yeah. Confucius is about maintaining harmony, so-called harmony, with other mankind. But therefore, you have a lot of struggles behind. Yes, maybe you want to maintain the surface harmony, but behind this surface harmony, it's about the dirty tricks. That's why you have things like the art of war, for example. That's all related, Art of war, it's a dirty tricks of a statecraft.
Hey, it's a very good book, though. If you haven't read it, you should, because there's a lot of insights.
The last chapter is good. The last few chapters are very, very good. It's a lot of wisdom. But, the early ones, it's about the strategy, about everything I read. The problem is, China is has old tradition, has a lot to offer. But Confucius is not the best.
Oh, I agree. But the thing is that when I look at it, even as China modernizes, you can still see Confucianism to me is more like a national religion. It feels very spiritually ingrained into them.
The Japanese had Shintoism, which was very militant, and
it was a lot
very similar.
It was, but the Japanese also, I would like to see China come through for the Chinese populace. I would love to see them enter an enlightenment. I would love to see that enter a liberalism in the Lockean sense, the individual, let people grow and try and fail and struggle and show us beauty and all that. I would love to see that.
I was being told what to do. That's exactly the essence you are talking about.
I want to see the whole world do that. Yeah. I mean, imagine if we had a world where there were no longer this nationalist threat coming from all directions at all directions. And we had more of a individualist people working and trying and figuring it out. But
well, I think this Belt and Road Initiative is actually going to be a great thing for the world.
Depends on how it's used. It depends on, I'm worried, it could go a couple of ways. China could go mercantilist with it.
What choice would they have? I mean, you're giving the people more goods, more services, and once they taste that, they don't want to ever give it back up.
Well, no, but mercantilism is what Great Britain did to China and India, and
we got corn syrup, and that's mercantilism.
Mercantilism is where
it's protectionism.
No, mercantilism is where we're going to go out and nab your natural resources, bring it back to us, build something with it, and then sell it back to you. Yeah. And it just
we sell something very expensive in exchange with your cheap labor and the raw material. Yep. So basically, they call the division, the world division of labor, according to the Marxist theory. They're studying a lot about this. The war structure. They call the war system. You have the so-called core countries. Then you have the countries around it, according to their.
And you've got to keep them stupid. You've got they purposely keep them stupid so that they don't start building stuff with their own goods.
Core countries are always the Western imperial powers, like Britain, like France, like as such.
When you open doors and make movement like the Belt and Road Initiative will, you can't keep people stupider than as if you didn't build the Belt and Road.
Well,
But you
initiatives.
see, the Belt and Road project, as I said earlier, it's not working with the traditional democratic countries. It's working with other semi-dictatorship states.
People
That's
they
the
can
essence
buy.
of a Belt and Road.
You're still you're still mixing
countries
the
that
pot.
they can feel the common ground. Because if you let the Chinese to deal with Australia, the culture is too far apart. So it's easier for Chinese to find the friendship with the Belarusians, with the Georgians, with the Armenians, all these
Well,
kind
and
of
not just-
non-mainstream countries. Let me put it that way.
Not just that, you get a single strongman country and you only have to buy one person.
Exactly, that's true. They have the leverage, right?
And
They have
what it does is it keeps that other country stunted.
yeah.
So that you
have,
can it
you have
keeps
the Vučić, for example, Vučić of Serbia. China is very actively engaging him right now. You have the Lukashenko of Belarus.
Mhm.
That's also, I did the case studies of these two countries. I mean, few countries. I did the Djibouti as well. Very interesting. China has launched its first military base in Africa, about 10 years ago. Now it has everything inside the military base. They have a hospital inside. They have its own, the AI as a control center there. Everything. It's crazy. Its own shops, dormitories, everything. So China has a very comprehensive strategy to conquer the world. So if you ask people, does China promote a peaceful rise? I believe it wants peace, but in the same time, China wants everywhere to be China.
Yeah, China definitely has a playbook that is not going to be as bloody as other historical playbooks have been, but China's got a playbook. They do.
Yeah, for sure.
The way
100%.
China has moved into Africa has been pretty impressive, but it sounds like some places in Africa are starting to sour on it because, again, in the mercantile fashion, China will go in and to clear the sagebrush, they'll hire a national, but then they'll bring in Chinese people to do the work that requires intelligence and all that. And so it's a lot like Halliburton in Iraq,
Yeah.
They bring in their friends, their buddies to do all the work that truly makes money and gains wealth. And all you did was sell your land and cleared of brush for them.
Well, in the end, when you try to expand all over the world, I mean, just look at what happened to the British Empire. Look what's happening to us right now.
It's true. China will go through it. Every societies have an age. They live so long.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And after China, I mean, right now, Indonesia and Vietnam and Cambodia are all knocking on China's door to become that industrial strength that China is for the U.S.
But they are all too small too. The sort of the natural material won't allow them to have such capacity as China. Even Vietnam doing very well. More than 10% growth every year.
What happens?
But I doubt they have the capacity can sort of replace China. That's impossible.
What happens when Foxconn China wants to use their manpower and is willing to ship all the raw goods over there, build the building for the Indonesians to start?
They're moving there already. That's true.
Yeah.
They're moving there already at the moment.
I think natural resources are going to become a globally tangible thing that just flows everywhere. I still think the ultimate resource, until we either breed them or construct them, is the labor.
Yes, 100%.
And just like the U.S. did with China by moving over the industry over there, China's going to do with Indonesia or possibly somewhere else. They might do it Indonesia is just the right now. China might move towards Siberia and might start building stuff there. They might build stuff within China. They might move stuff to the Middle East. It's going to happen. They might, right now, Iran would be an ideal untapped place for China to get into because, like you said, very intelligent population that is underutilized at this time, but strongly controlled.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. And there's okay, we got it. We do have to let you go, but this has been a fantastic conversation. This
Thank
really
you so
has.
much
No,
for
thank
inviting
you.
Thanks for coming on, Linjie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
China's a very interesting place to me. I spent time when I was in the Army in South Korea. I got a taste for the Asian continent and that culture over there. I love the culture and it's just I dig into the history. I love it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
for
you.
inviting me here.
And we've got to have you back on again, especially
Yeah,
if
for
something
sure.
new happens.
It's a fun show.
I would like to dig in and just have a show on kind of the political intrigue of inside China right now and really dig in on
One day
that.
we can do it. Just let me know beforehand. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
have
Linjie.
a wonderful night and you be safe. All right.
You too. You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.